Welcome to The People I Play With. This is the show where I interview, well, the people I play with. I'm your host, Jesse Bernico. Today's guest is T. How you doing, T?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Good. So, I only just met T through the Open Hearth gaming community where she ran a game of Ex Tenebris. But before we get into that, I want to talk about you as a player or game master in general. Tell me, what do you think your strong suit is? What does T bring to the table?
That's a good question. I think the things that come most naturally to me are around storytelling, world building, thinking about what makes characters tick.
You mentioned world building. Are you a person who is heavy into like the lore side of things?
My absolute favorite is really to do things collaboratively and then flesh them out. I'm in a long running set of campaigns right now with one of my groups, and we did a big time skip. And as part of that time skip, we did 2 or 3 sessions of the same microscope game. And in this case, it was like, what happened in the thousands and thousands of years in the setting since the last time we touched it? And I found that sort of collaborative world building, lore building within a group to be really fruitful and fun.
Do you think there's anything that you could improve as a player or game master?
I'm interested in accents, and I'm always sort of interested in bringing in more voices into play. And that's hard. Dialects and accents are just hard and interesting. So I think that's the easy answer. And I think the sort of more challenging thing is when to end scenes and when to edit and how to make that switch both as a game runner and as a player. Because at a very collaborative table, it can be easy to end up in the same scene going on far longer than it needs to. Like, you've answered the question, you've done the thing you need to do, but the conversation has its own momentum. So what are graceful ways to shift the camera? And when do you know that it's time to do that?
Scene shifting is an interesting topic. There's kind of two philosophies, because there are some people who are like, you should cut way sooner than you even think you need, and other people are like, but the scene needs room to breathe. So it is interesting to sort of explore that space. Now, you ran Ex Tenebris straight from a Quickstart. So I have to ask, what did you find so grabby that you just had to get to the table as soon as possible?
So actually, it was a request. You mentioned it was run through Open Hearth, and one of the things that's in the Open Hearth is there's a game request channel. And the thing that made me be like, oh yeah, absolutely, I will do that, is love a good spooky gothy setting, love a space opera. I do like investigation games, and it's something that I've been a little bit more timid about as a game runner. I tend to lean more towards the action adventure side of things or more political play. So I felt like it was a nice stretch for me.
Well, it's nice to know T does requests. Since you were working with this introductory text that you'd never encountered before, did you feel like there were any like major speed bumps that you encountered?
I always expect the first time I bring a game to the table, I'm going to do something wrong. It's sort of similar to Blades in the Dark, and where there's a position and effect. But there's 2 positions. There's Cure and Exposed. And I was leaning more on an exposed position earlier with lower stakes than the system really expects you to. But overall, I would say it's a very well written quick start, nice and organized, nice and easy to find things. I really enjoyed running it, and like I said, I do want to run it again.
Ex Tenebris is an investigation game where there is no fixed solution. The final truth of the mystery is constructed via play. However, as the GM, you're not working with a complete blank slate either. There is a surface level situation. There are some named NPCs with at least sketchy personality, but this creates an interesting creative tension when playing NPCs or other elements of the scenario. I'm curious if you felt like you had enough on hand to portray all those things effectively.
Very much so. One of the things I think I really liked about the system is the amount of information in the adventure and how it was organized. It almost felt a little bit like a mothership module. Instead of trying to discover what's in this room in this space dungeon, you're trying to figure out what's going on in this person's head. What's their deal? What do they need? What do they want? To me, as a GM, I really like filling in the blanks and figuring out like what goes here. I found it to be a really excellent amount of information. Y'all move pretty quickly in terms of getting clues. So as the menace track would fill up, there were also events that we didn't get to because you solved the mystery first. The first event was the cave in. The second event would have been the raiders that were the temple ship that was up in space would have shown up, and that would have dovetailed really nicely into this event that was suggested, that was built into the mystery that we didn't get to. I found it to be not overwhelming enough that I could keep it in my head at one time, and also just well formatted enough that I kind of like flip through stuff and reference my notes pretty easily.
You mentioned that you enjoy the social side of role playing scenarios. And one of the things that I'm always curious about in these, it's a mystery, but there is no fixed solution. So things are going to come out or get developed as we play, is NPC like motivation. So you have an NPC, but you don't know if they're the murderer. And you don't know if they're responsible for any of the things going on here. How do you play that character actively in the absence of what could be very, very critical information about their agenda?
I guess the short answer is, when it comes time to solve the mystery, there's a roll. And if the players roll well, they tell you what the solution is and they're correct. And if they roll badly, they're wrong and you tell them what the solution is. And so with that in the background, the way that I was running it as a GM is all of these people could be guilty, leaving myself a lot of vectors and pointers, but also a lot of loose ends. It felt pretty natural to me.
Okay, so you never found yourself at sea. You still felt like you had the ability to play the NPCs.
Everyone involved is also a pretty experienced role player. I didn't need to provide a ton of scaffolding for y'all to start exploring on your own, and I could just follow where you were leading.
Well, I mean, that's actually part of my concern. The PCs had a lot going on, but like, you're there too, and your characters matter too. Are we just having our little soap opera game? Was there enough there for you to be like, and I'm here too?
Well, yeah, definitely. Especially because I was also controlling the environment, and there were a lot of changes in the environment. The monster slowly making itself more and more known, showing that, oh, hey, this guy's actually mind controlled. If you'd taken more time and sort of lollygagged and not immediately been like, we're going down now, perhaps some other people would have shown up and also caused trouble. I definitely felt like I had plenty of space to play. And again, I like the social play, so I was enjoying that there was drama in the party, which I will say was set up by the relationship and role questions, which are presented as optional, but I would recommend using them.
I didn't realize they were optional. You're sort of getting into pacing stuff, and we played this over 2 sessions. But at one point, you mentioned feeling like it deserved more, and I'm curious about: were you talking about this individual single scenario, or were you talking about multiple scenarios?
Multiple scenarios. I believe the designers have been pretty explicit that this is a system that's designed for campaign play.
I was curious when you mentioned that, because this is one of those games where it's measured against these clocks. You mentioned the menace track and there's the clue track, and I sometimes find that those style games can become very beholden to this thing that maybe is either pushing us along faster than we would like or is lagging behind where we are. So I was wondering if that sort of mechanized pacing was like rubbing up against your own personal like aesthetics about where they're going and developing.
Not especially. As the game runner, you have a lot of control over both of those clocks, because the clue clock happens when somebody finds a clue, but those things for the most part are handed out by the game master. And then the menace track, there are some mechanical ways that will take the menace track, but it's also like they talk too long and you click on the menace track. They're basically dueling clocks. If you get to the end of either of them, the final confrontation triggers and it determines like, hey, are your investigators in a position where they have control of the situation, or is it sort of happening to them? So no, I think it was a good pacing for 2-shot. I think it would have been very tight as a 1-shot, even if it were 5 hours. Perhaps if I were very fluent in the system, I could get it down to a tight 1-shot. I think this is a game where I would like the players to have a little bit more space to wander around and talk to people, and that always just takes time.
Well, that's also true whenever you have the situation we had where there were inter-character relationship stuff, because that always introduces a bunch of moments and scenes that aren't about advancing the current situation. That's obviously gonna add to the time of play.
A 45-minute episode, not a 20-minute TV episode.
This kind of ties back to what I was talking about earlier about you being a player too. I feel like things for my character resolved rather nicely, and I think that's true of a lot of the other player characters. But I'm curious if you felt like things that you may have wanted to explore got resolved satisfactorily.
I wanted you to need to go into the mine and be in these subterranean caverns that were filled with oil because they needed to keep the things that were being mined from combusting. And I wanted to get y'all in that mine and for something spooky to happen. And I mean, agenda item, big check. Definitely happened. We got to play with all of the major parts of the system, which I appreciated. We did a confession scene. We did a little bit of combat. Yeah, overall, I think so.
Okay. Because I did notice that we went down, we sort of confronted this creature, and then we decided we were going to blow up the mine. There wasn't much of a confrontation with the mine owner. There wasn't much dealing with the big spaceship hanging out in space. So sometimes I wonder if there was lack of satisfaction on your end for the things that you are in charge of.
I definitely take your point. I would say no. I think part of that is, so when y'all rolled your final breakthrough roll, they had a high success. So you got to decide what the problem was and also what the solution was. I am interested in story, but also in a role-playing session as a GM, it's a collaborative narrative environment. I think of myself as more of a director of photography. Like, I tell us what we're looking at, I tell us how the shot's composed, and then I make sure that like all the pieces are in place. I don't think I ever told you where to go specifically, right? I think at any point that you were like, hey, we're going to do a different scene and talk to somebody else, it was one of the players was like, we should do this. The creature did invite you down into the mine because that's where it was. You followed that lead, but you didn't need to, right? You could have gone to the head of the mine and been like, hey, did you know you've got rock ghosts? I felt it was satisfactory all around, for me at least.
Certainly the character you did play the strongest towards the end was in fact the creature, and we did have a big confrontation with that. I'm gonna ask you a question that I get a little bit into dangerous territory. You mentioned the mine and how you were really looking forward to going down to the mine and how it was flooded with oil. And then in mid-session, I happened to mention that underwater cave diving and drowning is one of my actual serious real-life phobias. And I know that the Open Hearth community is really big on the safety tools, and you had the nice spreadsheet with the lines and veils. I tend to not fill those out. I'm always like, it's fine, we'll find it in play. Which is why when I said that, I appreciated you were like, oh wait, do we need to change this? And I'm like, no, I am all in. I'm a person who turns my traumas and phobias into creative material, not someone who doesn't want to encounter them. So I'm curious, as somebody who plays it with that community, with that kind of culture, have you ever actually run into a situation where you have been mid-stride in a game and had to roll back?
There's definitely been places where we've like come close to something. Either like one of the players, one of the moderators has been like, hey, just this is marked on the safety tools, like checked in with it. I mean, it is a community. You do play with the same people quite a bit, but like this is the first time we've ever met in our lives. It's very much a culture, and one that I explicitly kind of need personally to have a good time these days, where there is a culture of care for other players. I'm trying to come up with a specific example of something that's come up for me in play. I had a game I was running where somebody had a little bag of spell components, and I had a picture that I was like, oh, this is what it looks like. And then I realized that there were teeth in the bag of spell components, and one of the lines for the session was no dental trauma. And I was like, you know what? This is too close. There's no teeth in this bag. So I think that's the closest that I've come, where I'm just going to walk this right back. I think if you do it little and often, and you set the stage of it happening with smaller things, then when bigger things come up, everyone is like, oh yeah, we already know what to do. So it's a skill you practice.
It's usually been very minor things. So it's always curious to me when it's like we've got this huge like checklist of things. How often do we actually like run into some like awful dead zone of whatever they're dealing with? In this case, it was very funny because you did in fact run into an extremely large phobia of mine that never would have been on that checklist in the first place. And that's the thing that I often find, where all the things that like are actually tense for me are not things that are going to show up on a generic list of, problematic content.
I did add a couple specific ones for this particular Quickstart where I think I was just opening a tab. Dark claustrophobic environments was one of them. Maybe that's too vague.
It's the underwater component.
That's something we established at the table, and I hadn't really thought much of before.
And I didn't think about it until we were there. You mentioned flooded mines multiple times. Never once did I put two and two together until we were suiting up and going in, and I was like, wait a minute. But like I said, I used that as material. Let me draw on that in this moment. So that's why it wasn't a big deal. So there are things you just don't recognize until it's actually happening in front of you. So yeah, so I've been asking you all of these, hard questions about this game and your experience running it. Do you have any questions for me about this game?
One of the hallmarks of an open hearth game is that they're open doors, so people can leave at any time if they want to. And the first session was you and 2 other players, and the second session was you and 1 other different player who had not been there for the first session. The new player that came in stepped into one of the existing PCs, and the other one got mind controlled. And what was that like for you as a player? Is that something that you've encountered before?
You familiar with the game Burning Wheel?
Somewhat.
That same group of people makes another game called Burning Empires. It's a very involved game, and it's got a rigid structure. It's set up in phases. Each session is a maneuver within the phase. It's generally paced so that it takes about 6 to 8 sessions to complete a phase. This will be relevant to your question in a minute. My friend Colin and I got it in our heads that we were going to run an entire Burning Empires phase over the course of a convention weekend, but we were not going to require any players to be the same. So we were trading off every other GMing session. So not only did we not have consistent players, we didn't have consistent GMs. And what we were surprised by was that didn't feel weird at all. We had a very consistent vibe of the characters from start to finish. And part of that is because those games have these like character orienting things called like beliefs. And I feel like here, the thing fulfilling those roles were the things that you said were optional. The relationships towards each other and their role. The character that sort of had the player swap was the android-esque character who was playing the Pure. And while I feel like the first player played that more naive, and the second player played that more like wounded innocent, I also felt like the trajectory of things getting darker and that we were moving more and more towards a potential violent conflict. There's no reason that wouldn't have come out from a character that starts out as very naive, and then the deeper in they get, the more of that old trauma comes out. So I didn't feel like, oh, I'm now playing against a completely different character. It felt more like, oh, I'm now playing against a deeper side of this character.
I do feel like you took it in stride. I'm glad it worked out and you felt like it was cohesive.
I finally get to let Darius die, and my character is quite happy to not have to ever deal with him and his weird love interests ever again. He's now just paperwork. To begin to wrap up a little bit, a question I like to ask people is, do you have a favorite recent game memory?
I'm in a Monster Hearts game, also on the Open Hearth, and it's been going amazing. We've just wrapped up the very first scene in a homeroom. Another character bit my character, and the character that bit my character is just a human, and it's just sort of snowballed.
Are there any games you haven't had a chance to play yet that you really want to?
Well, let me consult my spreadsheet. Honestly, the thing that I've wanted to play for a while is Teeth. I am running a couple one-shots of this weekend, so I'm very excited for that. I'm running the Blood Cotillion one-shots, which have come to me very highly recommended. Never touched the system before. Excited to run it. And what else is here? Ooh, I do really want to play Inevitable, which is a sort of sad cowboy Arthurian game. And I'm thinking about running Kane, mainly because Ex Tenebris makes me really want to run a longer investigation game with an action-adventure bent. And I feel like that would fit the bill. So, yeah, those are sort of high on the list right now.
The lists are never ending about what we want to play, which is why I always ask that question. All right, well, thank you for being one of the people I have played with and for chatting with me today. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to The People I Play With. Please join me in 2 weeks when I interview Bree Seal about family matters in the Hulu Dark.